Hi, Tuttie Fruittie's here. Kristen is my name, and Tuttie Fruittie's is my farm. I've been farming for now going on 3 years. So 2021 will be my third year farming. I'm a solo farmer in Minnesota, and I currently lease land at an incubator farm known as Big River Farms. I sell at multiple farmers markets in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So at my farm, I'm growing organic produce and selling that produce, as well as last year I started juicing my produce and selling my organic vegetable juice. I wanted to do a quick video here and maybe several videos, hoping that it'll help any emerging farmers in some areas that I've learned over the years that have helped me that I did not know when I got into farming. So here we go. But recently I was told that a book might be helpful in my planning for this next year, and I haven't finished it yet, but already I do enjoy it, and I think it is a valuable book for any farmer. But I'm specifically speaking to any emerging farmers here, so people that are new to farming. And it is called the Organic Farmer's Business Handbook by Richard Wiswall. And it comes with a CD that I haven't opened yet. I'm a great student. No, I am. But I just wanted, this has inspired me already. I've been thinking about doing videos already. But first off, something that isn't talked about a lot in farming is that farming is a business. And in business, you have to make a profit in order to continue your business. So interacting with many different people, it's as if this isn't really talked about a whole lot, or maybe it's me that I think it should be talked about more because I want to be successful in having a profit in my business so that I can keep doing it, because I do enjoy farming, and I do enjoy growing food. And sometimes there's a misconception about, oh, you just grow food and then you go out and you sell it. What's the big deal? But there's a lot more to it. And the main thing that I've been growing food now for this, I'll be going into my 9th year, and starting a business that grows food and sells that is very different than just growing food. So I wanted to say that up front because I really don't think that it's expressed enough and emphasized enough. Maybe people are shy in that respect of talking about money and talking about making a profit, and there's a misconception that profit is bad, but profit is not bad. It's actually a necessity in running a business and wanting that business to be successful and continue. So something that this book already has emphasized that I appreciate the aspect of it saying that farming is a business, and also that it says that you have to have a proactive approach in your profits, and that you set the dollar amount of what you want your profit to be, and then arrange your farm plan around how are you going to make that profit. Well, if you're starting out in farming, and if I think back to in 2008 2018 when I was planning, as well as the beginning of 2019, for my farming season of 2019, I had no conception of this. I had started designing edible gardens for people in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I was growing food. So I kind of saw like what it took to grow a business, and I was also a general manager at a juice bar, and so I saw from that business pieces and aspects. But as far as a farm business, I was taking classes, and these classes were focused on growing food. They were not focused on how to make a profit, or that farming is a business, or how to sell your product, how to get it out and find a market space to sell your product. Those things were touched on a little bit, but to my recollection, and like I said, this is, from my perspective and from my experience of going from the place that I went from and what I like to focus on, there wasn't the focus that I wanted, or I even knew, because it's like when you're new at something and you're taking a class, you kind of just go off of what is being told to you, right? You can ask questions, but they're primarily questions about what that class is. And sometimes you have questions outside of the box, or outside of what's being presented to you. But unless you're presented a whole class or way of structuring your business or focusing your business, things can be kind of limited. So anyways, I wanted to make a video too to help if there was any way that some people were getting misconceptions, or maybe they just don't haven't been presented a certain way of doing something, or they're starting a business and they're like, where do I start? I don't know. Well, anyways, we'll do this little video here about how I did some calculations on mapping out my field, what I wanted my yield to be, and that's how I knew how much seed to get. So first off, I was like, well, I want to make X amount of yield. So sort of what this guy is saying with writing down what number you want your profit to be. So he gives an example in his book of 30,000. You want your net profit to be 30,000. Well, how do you get there? So I did a similar thing with just planning out my field. I said, okay, what yield do I want? What do I want my total harvest to be for each crop? And then I know how much area of land I need, and then I know how much seed to buy. After the end of the season, I compared what I wanted my yield to be with what my yield actually was, and if that crop was profitable. And if it was profitable, I would grow it the next year. But were there any notes of that maybe I should change something, or should I keep it the same? For instance, I grew 2 beds of baby kale. My beds are 120 feet by 3 feet. I broadcasted the seed. I put row cover over the seed. and I just let it do its thing. I didn't have to like weed anything because I broadcast the seed pretty dense, so I wasn't doing rows of kale. It was taking up the whole bed area. I did 2 beds in the spring and 1 bed in the fall. So I did 2 separate plantings. I kept track of the dates from seed to harvest. So seed to harvest in the spring was 42 days. And in the fall, it was 22 days. And then I also kept track of what was the first day of harvest and what was my last day of harvest, because I want to know how long I can keep harvesting and selling that product. And of course, keeping track of the harvest yield. So each time I harvested, I weighed out how much I had harvested, and then I calculated out how much I sold. So at each farmer's market, I was not the best at keeping track of each product that I sold, but I did keep track of how much I sold total. And that is one thing that I definitely recommend doing, is keeping track of each product. So what you take to market, mark down everything that you take to market, and then mark down anything that's left over, and keep track of what you're selling that product at. So I have I have baby kale. It's a mixture of different kinds of kale for $5 for a half-pound bag. That's actually a little bit on the cheaper side now that I've been at farmers markets and I see what other people are selling products at, but I like that price. Personally, I want something that I will make a profit at, but can be more accessible to people as well. And I'm still making over 50% profit on that product. So I take into consideration when I'm growing something, does it have to be grown in the greenhouse, seeded in the greenhouse first? Then I'm buying potting soil, so that's a cost. This baby kale I did have to buy row cover for, so that was a cost, but I didn't have to start anything in the greenhouse, so I didn't have to buy potting soil, so that was a bonus. Out in the field, how much care did I take for this product? Well, I did irrigate, so I took time for that, but I didn't have to hoe around and weed because it was so heavily seeded. So I really didn't have to weed anything because there weren't any weeds. There were some few grasses here and there, and when I harvested, I picked those out. The time-consuming part of growing this baby kale was the cleaning it and bagging it for market. So that was time-consuming, and I did take that into consideration. But I did decide to grow it in 2020 because my profit was, actually this first year was over 70% profit, but I did do 3 beds total. And this next year I decided to do 2 beds, and I wanted to let one of the beds grow to full-size kale. So I was just going to let the baby kale grow to full-size kale and sell bunches of full-size kale. So I did that. And I did not seed a fall crop in 2020 like I did in 2019. So that's something that I decided to change and see what the difference was in if I could have even less time on a crop. Like I didn't have to re-till a bed and then reseed and then row cover like in 2019 for my fall planting. I just let what I planted in the spring in 2020 become baby kale, harvest that, clean it, package it, sell it, and let it grow into full-size kale, and then bunch those, clean it, bunch your kale, and sell it, and see what that profit would come out to be. And I retilled one of the beds, and as I said, I let one of the beds just keep growing. And my profit was 60% profit on this crop. So these beds were still the same size, 120 feet by 3 feet. I still did the broadcasting and the row cover, but no greenhouse work and no weeding. Now, when I grew from the baby to the full, there were, quite a bit of weeds actually from that. So I did have to do work when it came to growing from the baby to the full-size kale and taking care of that crop. And I have to factor in that time. But bunching full-size kale and the time that it takes to clean baby kale and bag that is like way different. So you got to think about that. Like, I was like, oh my God, this is fast. This bunching of kale, and then I just clean it, and then it was like 3 times faster. So, also I want to see again days from seed to harvest and how long that took. I was able to seed earlier this past year in 2020 than I was in 2019. But the first 42 days from seed to harvest in 2019 for the spring. And in 2020, it was 33 days from seed to harvest. So my first harvest date for 2020 was 5/29, but I was able to plant earlier, and it didn't take as many days. It took 33 compared to 42. And actually, I planted later in 2019. I planted in May, and I planted in last week, April in 2020. So you never know, because I was thinking, well, it's going to take longer probably in 2020 because the ground is still so cold in April. But it was, my rule of thumb is 2 full weeks, so 14 days of 32 degrees and above. So that means nothing lower than 32. And if you have 2 full weeks, so 14 days, then you're ready to plant outside. And that works. That's worked for me for 8 years. Now I'll be going into my 9th year of growing food. So because the seasons keep changing and you never know if you're going to be planting earlier or later, that has worked for me as a way to predict if there's going to be a late freeze, so I don't lose any crops. And again, I'm in Minnesota, so I'm in central Minnesota in around Minneapolis and St. Paul. So that is warmer too, because in the more populated cities, it's warmer. The farm is further out. It's Marine on St. Croix is where I lease land. It's at a farm called Big River Farms. I don't know if I said that in the beginning of this or not. But it is an incubator farm that helps people have easier access to land and infrastructure in order to start their farming business. So I applied in 2018 in December and was accepted into their program. And I'm very grateful, because I wouldn't have been able to have this experience that I know of otherwise. Before that, I had been growing food, as I said, but also applying for urban ag jobs for 6 years, and was not successful in getting an offer of a job in that. So I don't know, I guess the universe didn't want me to work for someone else. They wanted me to do something on my own. maybe that's why. So you never know. I mean, I also think sometimes I get stuck in one way of that things are supposed to happen, and so I look for that one thing, and then what's supposed to be is just like off over here, but if I don't turn my head, I'm not going to see it. It's one of those kind of things. So anyways, talking about profit and that farming is a business, this is something that I've done to see if I want to continue to grow a product, maybe expand how much I grow of it, depending on how much it sells or doesn't sell. I could also, think, hey, this product sold and I want to grow it again, but I'm not going to grow as much. Or this product sold really fast and I actually need to grow more of it. Or this product took a lot of time. I had to weed it a lot, and then bugs got to it, then more weeding, and it hardly sold at market. So why would I grow it again? Or at market, maybe there's a lot of the same, and so some people are buying from other farmers and they're buying from you too, but they aren't buying as much from you as they could because everyone else has the same product. So that's something else that comes into play, but you won't know that unless you're at that farmer's market, or maybe you frequent it as a customer first before you become a vendor, and so you maybe are already aware of what is selling at that particular market. I personally have been learning as I go because I have been a customer at farmers markets, but the ones that I have been at, I was not a customer previously because it was just in a different neighborhood than I lived. But when I applied to farmers markets, I was like, I'm supposed to be here. I just was like, that's how I felt about it. I was like, I just feel like I'm supposed to be here, and it seemed right, and it worked out. So, and it has worked out, and I do enjoy the places that I sell. And, but that's something that I've learned along the way too, is that I have to factor in what are other farmers selling at these markets that I'm at? What is the cost that they're selling their product at? And factor in how much I might sell of my own product based upon those factors. So if I'm not selling a lot of something, that could be a reason. It's just because there's a lot of other people selling the same thing. But this next year, 2021, if we take into consideration the baby kale and how that has been successful for the past 2 years, I do want to grow it again in 2021. There is something that I am going to change about it. So last year I did just one planting, but let one of the beds grow to full size. The first year I did 2 beds in the spring and then 1 bed in the fall. And this next year, I'm going to do 1 bed in the spring and 1 bed in the fall. Because I like that I do get a good yield on my product. The time spent on having to weed like doesn't exist because as I said, I broadcast and heavily dense seed my baby kale mixture, and the time and the profit that I get from it is worth it to me. But I do enjoy that I don't have to weed so much. And so even though it's easier to bunch the larger kale and sell that, as I did this past year in 2020, the weeding that I had to do throughout that growth period from when it was baby kale to full size, I am taking that into consideration for 2021 and thinking about how if I grew 2 beds, I could do that and I could sell that, but I personally think that 1 bed is sufficient in the spring, and I want to do another bed in the fall. So I will do 2 separate plantings of baby kale mixture, one in the spring and one in the fall in 2020. And I hope this has helped you with discovering if you're making a profit or not on your crops in your farming business. And I'll do some more videos to see. I'm going to think about different things that I've learned that have been really helpful for me. And if they're helpful for someone else, it's well worth it. It's like, where am I going with this? but that's what I mean. And then also that it's kind of helpful to say out loud too for me. So but this has been nice to share, and I hope it's helped someone else. And if you would like to leave a comment or ask a question, please do so. I will put a link to where I purchased this book in the video, and all my other contact information, email, Facebook, Instagram, and hope everyone has a wonderful day.